Welcome to the Summit Speaks, presented by Summit Edge, where we explore the digital transformation redefining the global supply chain.
I think we hear this buzzword all the time, right? Chat with your data now, right? But can you kind of explain what that actually means in practical terms?
So this is now like it's spreading everywhere, right? And in the ops world, it would mean something like you ask, what's at risk today, right? And then you get an answer based on the live operational data. So you don't rely on these static dashboards anymore.
The costs that are associated with this. What do you actually believe is the true cost of spreadsheet-driven reporting? Not just labor hours, but just by way of making decision, missed SLAs, margin leakage, other things, operational deficiencies that we might not be seeing. So
The labor is a very visible cost, right? You can measure, you can monitor over time. So that's, I would say, is a little bit easier than understanding the true cost of the delayed decision making, right? So the bigger cost here is definitely the decision delay. You detect problems after they've already missed SLA.
hello, everyone. Today on the Summit Speaks, we're joined by Selman Kahya, a founder and engineering leader based in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's currently building systems in the AI space and previously led engineering teams at Kajabi, which acquired Vibely, where he was the CTO at Vibely. Earlier in his career, he worked at Uber and Yahoo, contributing to systems and operating systems at mass scale. Selman brings deep insight into building real-time, high-performance platforms, and today we're diving into the future of intelligent operations. So, Selman, welcome, and thank you for being on.
Hey, Manjot, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think it was a great overview, a quick summary.
Awesome. Cool, man. So we're just gonna dive right in and get some of this initial questions going. So you've been in this space for quite some time, helping build large scale systems. So we live in a very real time world right now. So yet logistics companies still wait 24 or 48 hours, sometimes more, for reports. Why do you think this gap exists between data generation to a decision-making process?
Yeah, I would say so. As part of the intro, you mentioned that I have a software engineering background. So, in terms of the technical side of things, the data that is stored in very different places, right? You got ERP system, WMS, TMS. So, at the end of the day, you need to unify all these systems, right? You cannot just like look at one system and
Mhm.
understand. Like get the insights right and make a decision. You need to unify everything so that and create this very detailed report that touches many different systems. And this unification is usually something that a human would create, right? Like a workflow. Like eventually the data would flow into a data warehouse, some analytics database, right?
Mhm.
And it needs to be extracted. Like reports would be sent to people in different intervals. Many of these systems are built for transactions, right? It's not for like quick analytics where, for example, if you use like Google Analytics, it's for people to run queries and get things mostly in real time, ideally.
Mhm.
But it's not the case with these systems. It's
Yeah.
mostly for transactions like manipulating data, creating some records, right? So teams have to rely on batch jobs that run every night, every week, right? And there's a lot of manual reconciliation over this data. So all these things create a lot of latency, right? The more processing that happens and more like different data sources you need to look at, the latency increases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of that latency is the challenge that this, especially in the supply chain space, where decisions are almost at a minute level. Like there's like a very strong book, The 1 Minute Manager, which is very, very applicable to the logistics space. But sometimes those decisions are being made with imperfect data or lack thereof at any, so diving back into some of the costs that are associated with this, what do you actually believe is the true cost of spreadsheet-driven reporting? Not just labor hours, but just by way of making decision, missed SLAs, margin leakage, other things, operational deficiencies that we might not be seeing. So, what do you think some of those costs are?
Yeah, so the labor is a very visible cost, right? You can measure, you can monitor over time. So that's, I would say, is a little bit easier than understanding the true cost of the delayed decision making, right? So the bigger cost here is definitely the decision delay. You detect problems after they've already missed SLAs, right? And maybe it ended up creating, there's like customer escalations and support dealing with a lot of angry customers or business partners, right? So it's a lot harder to quantify the impact of all this.
Hmm.
And the spreadsheet, like at the end of the day, if you rely on spreadsheets for decision making, there at any point in time, there are multiple spreadsheets that you're dealing with. There's not just like one spreadsheet that has everything and it's accurate. And so the fact that there are like all these different data sources, different spreadsheets, different versions, it slows down meetings where like you need to make a decision, right? But there's lack of data. It's inaccurate. People are not clear if data is accurate or represents or captures enough. So this is more like margin leakage, right? And
Yep.
in ops,
Exactly.
the tax isn't just the time. It's like whenever you miss a window, right? Rerouting, something is late, the last minute staffing changes. So these things are at the end cost you a lot. And this is, I would say, like the probably the true cost of relying on spreadsheets for reporting.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, definitely. Being an operator at one point in my previous life, knowing how fluid some of the operations are, not being able to make the right decision and the most efficient decision in that moment, especially when you're running, with my time at Amazon, you're running these massive facilities. Though I would say at Amazon, we measured everything, but you still had to pour over spreadsheets or pour over different data menus and things like that in order to see that
Inevitable.
real time in near real time or real time, right? And um, a lot of times that meant getting you off of the floor where the work is happening and trying to figure out what's going on in the inefficiency, which then doesn't allow you to make the decision real times. Like this challenge of constantly chasing the data is very real, definitely in
Yeah.
operations, but all throughout the supply chain space.
Exactly. And the other thing is that it's a lot of context switching, right? And it's
Yes.
not very natural to a human to go from like 1 second you're dealing with something physical in a corner, right? And then the other minute now you're looking at spreadsheets, trying to make a informed
Yes.
decision, but there's all this
Yes.
pressure. People are waiting on you, right? It's the quality of your decisions are like it's really hard for a human to process all these signals and make the perfect decisions all the time, right? Like you could do it for a couple hours, couple days, but you cannot do this reliably for your entire shift.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think as we have seen now systems evolve, like, now we got much more sophisticated large language models and kind of AI driven, AI native modeling in this industry, and the AI algorithms and models are getting stronger and more intuitive. We're starting to see this concepts pop up of like shortening that latency. I think the how is still being defined, still very much so. And I think leaders like you are helping kind of shape some of that. But really, I think we hear this buzzword all the time, right? Chat with your data now, right? But can you kind of explain what that actually means in practical terms?
Yeah. So probably a lot of listeners already use ChatGPT or one of these services, right? Where you ask a question in natural language and it understands your intent. Maybe it does a Google search, it looks at different data sources and gives you an answer. So this is now like it's spreading everywhere, right? And in the ops world, it would mean something like you ask, what's at risk today, right? And
Yeah.
then you get an answer based on the live operational data, so you don't rely on these static dashboards anymore, right? And like it could be very open-ended or very specific, right? It's not like a deterministic system where someone sits down, thinks about all the questions you might have in your
Hmm.
head and put them in charts, dashboards, right? And then you go. The thing is that things just keep changing, right? Operations, it's
Totally.
constantly moving. And now
Yeah.
you end up having these very static dashboards someone created many months or years ago, and you still rely on them.
Hmm.
Updating them is hard. Like you don't have permissions, or some data is missing. Like you constantly deal with this pain, right? So in a practical sense, you ask a question and it translates, these systems translate the question into queries. And then it understands, it looks at different data sources, it pulls from the right systems, and it applies the approved definitions, guardrails, and it eventually returns an answers. And that also some not just like an answer, but it could also understand your intent or like what you're trying to learn from the system. It could suggest next steps, or suggests actions to take, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I think this is not just chatting, like not just having a conversation, but it's like a very knowledgeable person about your business that can answer any type of query that you might have in less than a minute, right? Which is like, if you go back 20 years, this is like magical, very like it's crazy that we now have these type of systems in our hands.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about it, you would have like that's the equivalent of like an account exec, or sorry, an executive assistant that knows everything about every part of your business. All you have to do is look to your right and say, "Hey, can you tell me about this?" And then
Yeah.
it can actually tell you, right? Like so.
Yeah.
Nowadays, that's a real possibility. And I've had a previous guest on where we talked about this concept of, AI being an assistant to the decision making. And I know we hear a lot of times like it's going to replace our jobs and things like that. I mean, to a certain extent, it does change how you do business, and it does change how you interact with your data and how you interact with this decision making process. But the prompts, the deep dive, asking the five whys to get to that root cause problem that is actually truly causing the leakage and the problems, really where it comes in is you're able to arrive at that decision faster now rather than having to spend all this extra time, right? So as we kind of think about how this changes the lives of these operators, so if you were talking to, let's just say, like a COO or like a director of operations or something like that, someone that is responsible for the day-to-day business operations, how would this fundamentally change their day-to-day business day?
Yeah, I think AI in general is having a very similar effect in many different roles. In software engineering, now like it's the legwork of implementing, like typing code by hand and like
Right.
testing things. All these things are being abstracted away from humans. Now the systems could do it a lot faster, right? I don't think it means it's replacing people. Now people are sort of shifting from this low level work to more impactful high level work, right? So in a operations type role, the day shifts from reviewing reports, right? Like looking at things. Instead, you start spending your time managing exceptions, right? What did not go well? And like you look at outcomes, right?
Yeah.
So those things directly translate to a business impact, right? Whereas juggling between 10 different spreadsheets and trying to figure out like what's happening, I think in 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, it's crazy that people were like
Totally.
doing all this stuff manually. And now I just like the AI understands and it takes action. Like I sit at a higher level and like I think it'll be more and more obvious. So instead of like weekly KPI decks where like you go over your numbers, I think it'll be more like the loop will be like things will be moving quicker. What changed since yesterday? Why? And what do we do now? Like instead of having these weekly meetings where things already
Yeah.
happened, people started losing context, right? Now you're discussing things in more real time because you got the bandwidth to do so, right? So I think it really changes the behavior here. Teams sort of stop waiting on analysts or like whoever has the insights, right? Instead, those loops are being closed in near real time. And you just mentioned like the pace of you making these decisions, like it really compounds over time, right? Not
Totally.
in just
Yeah.
the ops world, but even at startups, tech companies, right? The faster you make decisions, the more you try different things, experiment, right? You would be making more progress, right?
Totally.
So I
Yeah.
think that's the impact we'll start seeing.
It's really such a fundamental shift from like, what we used to like, when you have these, daily business reviews, weekly business reviews, monthly, quarterly, like like at some point it's a very Japanese concept called gemba of in operations where you kind of go to your work and you every hour 2 hours you're kind of reassessing, making real-time decisions and how to strategically move small things to help the
Uh,
later outcome. And these kind of real-time tools really will enhance that process. And I do completely agree with you. I think in the next even 2 to 3 years, these more forward-thinking businesses are going to completely go away. I mean, and monthly business reviews do not make any sense anymore, right? But a month later, your business is should be like completely different. And looking at it historically doesn't make any sense.
I think so.
Maybe there's some value to making like large scale business process changes to review your business on a weekly basis. But I would almost say like you do these, every 2 hour gembas where you're taking the data that is available to you in real time in that moment and then making strategic pivots and changes based on what you're discovering, right? And that decision latency kind of gets. So as we kind of think about these, like companies have spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars building out these really cool dashboards, which I'd call basically pure descriptive analytics, right? They don't really necessarily offer any sort of where you're headed about what you should do or how to deep dive it further. They're just there as a representation of where you're at, right? And that into the future, do you think the next iteration of this is going to be like systems that give you this data instantly and in a way that you want it to be consumed? So like what do you kind of see? How do we start shifting away from this just dashboard mentality and make our data more active?
Yeah, I think dashboards will continue to exist. They're great for monitoring, right? Just to get a snapshot of like how things are going, but they're really weak for investigation, right? Not if, when something goes wrong, looking at a dashboard and like all the data is just very time consuming, hard. So they don't ask for why did this happen quickly, right? It lets you understand, oh, something is trending down. It's not supposed to, but like it doesn't tell you where to look at, right? It's very static in a sense. And I think that the future is a lot more interactive. You ask a question, you drill down, you compare periods, get explanations instantly with context, right? Not just like there was this that happened a month ago and there's this. You look at like charts that are trending differently, but when you have the context over dashboard, or like you ran a campaign last month, or like this happened, this broke down, right? So then it gets a lot easier to sort of understand those trends, right? So I don't think dashboards will die, but they'll probably still be the homepage, like whenever you go and
Absolutely.
like. But I think the conversation, this being able to go back and forth with a system that becomes the debugger, right? Where
Totally.
what you use to understand the root cause and sort of figure out like how to address it, how to fix it, right? How to improve that trend.
Yeah. And like, some of these decision latency problems that you have with dashboards, as your pure sense, like unless you do kind of make this evolutionary step to making your data more interactive, there's so many systems out there. Well, I guess a better question back to you would be, why do you think there's so many data initiatives that promise this automation, but yet somehow teams still get buried in Excel sheets?
Yeah, it's ops data is very messy compared to other, like if you have a note taker app, right? The data structure is very simple. You got a note title and a note, maybe you got some images in it, right? Like very simple. And then you say you have a logistics, like some sort of management system where every company does things slightly differently, right? Like the order of things keep changing. So these tools automate extract, like you can automate extraction, but the last mile, the messy business logic, the metric definitions, exceptions, these things drift over time, right? And edge cases multiply. Excel still, like in this type of world, Excel was able to stay the fastest patch to sort of reconcile these contradictions, right? Because it's easy to use, like everyone
Everybody
knows
gets it.
Excel,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
But I think what the biggest unlock in the last couple years has been that now with the LLMs, large language models, generative AI, and the reasoning models, reasoning capabilities of these systems, things change drastically because these systems can now look at very unstructured or like very messy data and sort of draw conclusions. It's really hard for a human, like a human software engineer, to look at three different databases with 100 plus tables and all
Yeah.
different data types, different formats, right? And sort of then understand all the relationship between these entities and like how and sort of outline how things work, right? It would take a human hours or days to do something, anything meaningfully. But with these reasoning models, they can query database instantly, understand the type of the structure of the data and sort of define the relationships, test them. Did it fail? Okay, maybe like then take a step back to do it differently, right? That was not the case. The systems were really deterministic, right? You sit
Yes.
down, you map all these relationships, and then when there's something new, the system breaks, right? Now someone needs to sit down and define, like
Yes.
in the back side, they need to do some mapping so that the system understands this new world, and like things just keep changing, right? It's really keep these things
Yeah.
up to date all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why like Exile was able to survive this long, but
Yeah.
we might start seeing this play out differently in the next decade.
No, absolutely. I see it now. Like this ability to make rational decisions, the reasoning that you're calling it, right? The even at like the inception of like ChatGPT, that reasoning was really not quite there. Like you could see kind of like a ton of hallucinations, a lot of
Yeah.
like just concepts that you like you're kind of like, where did you get that from, right? And but as these and it's amazing that all of us know what large language models and kind of like this AI native kind of natural language kind of conversational AI communication is nowadays. Like that, like when if you think about it, it's only been around for like, I mean, large language models have been around forever, and this concept has been around for quite some time. But at like to for a general person to understand it and to be able to use it at the scale that we're using it now, it's really only been like 3 or 4 years, right? And it's amazing the amount of transformation that's already come in these last 3 or 4 years. And
Crazy.
so if you think about kind of there's huge teams in some businesses that are purely there as data scientists, business analysts, things like that. So, do you think that at some point that those jobs are going to either change, or that like will AI replace analysts basically, or and kind of turn every individual like an operations manager in the supply chain space into like a data-driven decision maker?
Yeah, this is really interesting, and it's really hard to predict like what's gonna happen. Here's what I think. I don't think it'll be. It's less of a, the way that I think about it is that it's less of a replacement and more like a multiplication, right? Now, if
Correct.
one
Yeah.
person could do a ton more, and it's not that the work is limited or the demand is limited, right? Imagine your business could spend 10 times more, like is able to sort of dedicate that much effort and time to improve the customer experience or like your relationship with your business partners, right? I think it's an enabler. I think what's going to happen is that like in this case, analysts, they're going to move up the stack, right? We were just discussing like doing the legwork, like so in the software engineering context, you no longer write code by hand. I just tweeted the other day that we're going to like in 10 years from now, we're going to probably tell our kids that, oh, a decade ago we were writing code by hand, like character by character, and they're not gonna believe, oh, like really, how come? Like that's crazy.
Exactly.
Right now, the 99% of the code that is written in my projects are AI. Right? I no longer go and like manually type stuff.
Right.
This lets me sort of move up the stack, right? Instead of that the thing that AI could now do really well, I spend my time understanding the customer needs, right? So I think it's similar thing would apply here. Analysts would sort of look at things at a little bit more high level. They're going to have a ton more time and bandwidth to run a lot of different experiments, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Try different things, do predictive modeling, spend more time with the to improve data quality, right? Not just like repetitive reporting, which is not like, I don't think it's the best use of time, right? To sort of
Totally.
do the same things over and over. Like it's not fun. You're not learning. It's thing they could contribute to the business a lot more, and AI is sort of enabling this trend.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love this idea of like moving up the stack. You've said it a couple of times, and that's exactly, uh, like when I was thinking about like in my own business, a lot of times, the decision that I have to make now is how do I further optimize and using technology rather than hiring headcount, right? Like there's because each one of the people that works with me can do bigger and better things, more optimized things more efficiently using these types of tools now, right? And our output as a business is much higher than what the same team would have been able to do even 4 or 5 years ago, right? So, and I think that growing with that technology is hyper important. So my next question kind of is in that vein. So like many companies, in previous lives, you used to scale by hiring more people.
Yes.
But as you kind of see it, do you think intelligent data systems will genuinely allow companies to scale, whether it's their size, revenue, shipments, in the supply chain space, proportional to their headcount, faster than the headcount? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So I think if you reduce coordination overhead, right, and keep humans focused on exceptions instead of like constant monitoring, you would not need that many people, right? You could achieve a lot more with less people. The baseline is changing here, right? And the problem with scaling is that it breaks when volume grows faster than visibility, right? Companies usually hire people to compensate for a lack of decision speed, right? You're not able to make decisions quick and accurately enough that you just throw humans at the problem, right?
Right,
And
right,
over
right.
time, you optimize and like it becomes less of a problem. But there's always an area where like there's some firefighting in this corner. Okay, let's throw some
More people at it.
more people and fix this problem. And then once it's resolved, then you move on to the next problem, right? But I think the AI and like the fact that you're making decisions a lot faster and more accurately, it sort of breaks this pattern.
Yeah.
So I think there's this thing that's being discussed in Bay Area where it's not going to be too long until we see one person billion-dollar company, right?
Yeah.
Where they employ a lot of AI agents like marketing, customer support, coding agents, right? And
Yeah.
there's one human at the top that's like coordinating all this work, and they sort of abstract themselves out from all the manual like work, but they're still there. They got the vision, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting.
Absolutely. It's very cool. Like, I was reading an article the other day about how the future belongs to product and operations leaders, right? If you're product and operations minded, like you know how to optimize different internal processes, you can then kind of set those guardrails and those parameters, and then have an agent that does that work for you,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
then same thing, like if you have the vision, like you called it, the product focused mindset to find the right product market fit, find your customer, understand your space a little bit more, how to segment, how to build around that, then you can the coding on the back end, the customer UI UX, all those things that you would have hired massive tech
Yes.
teams to do, you can do that also now using these tools and technology.
Yeah. I think the like having high agency is the key, right?
Yes.
And the like operations person, product person, those are roles where you had to have this skill of like having high agency, self-starter, right? And
Yes.
now the cost of building things is going down. Like there are less sort of gatekeeping in a sense, right? You got more
That's right.
resources. You don't need a team of like tech people, right? So like you could
Yeah.
just go and build and do things. So I think you're exactly right.
No, it's a some of it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but, as long as you understand your market, you understand your space, like, there's always new problems to solve, right? So,
Yes.
there's that's and it's really exciting, at least for me, is that, like, being on the precipice of what I consider, like, this new iteration, new generation of, like, when it took, 6, 10, 12 months sometimes to take a product to market, now you're talking like shrinking even that latency to like a few months, and then you can test, iterate, and kind of really, build something that actually makes sense for your industry. Um, so kind of shifting back to the supply chain space, last few questions from my side. One of them being around kind of the trust in operations. So how do you ensure some of the conversational outputs that AI provides, the outputs that AI provides are truly accurate, governed, and also have a reliable enough backing from the leadership team side so you don't erode any sort of customer trust?
Yeah, there are like couple things you mentioned, so I want to break them down. The accuracy, right? Having the ground truth. So I think it's really important that everyone in the organization aligns on what metrics, what is the KPI, right? The metric definitions, and
Absolutely.
so that alignment needs to be there. Otherwise, like the next steps, it just gets a lot harder to be on the same page and improve, like address the pain points of the organization, right? Then comes governance. So I think historically this is less of a problem. Like you have in all the software, you got role-based access. Some people, like a portion of your team is able to see certain dashboards, queries, right? And humans are in the process where like there's some high stakes action that needs to be taken, right? I think with AI, like one thing I think that there'll be a bit of a problem is that AI is not very deterministic, right? It's really hard to
Sure.
set guardrails.
Yeah, that's right.
You could trick an AI system right now, and a large language model, by saying, "Hey, like if you don't ask for this, like I would do harm to myself," or like there are all these different ways that you can like force large language model to do something for you, right? And
Yes,
in a historical sense, when you create a software system, it's deterministic. Like there's
exactly.
only so number of paths that it can take, and you
Correct.
set guardrails. With AI, it's a lot harder. There are a lot of improvements in this area, but it's still definitely lacking. So I think this would be probably the most important piece. Auditability. So whenever there's a
Mhm.
question being asked, like an answer being shown, like all the there needs to be a trail of what happened, what was asked, what was the answer, and who
Yeah.
took an action, right?
Yep.
Which again is very standard. But I think the governance, the access, like that is going to be key here. It's probably one of the top problems I think that needs to be addressed for a bigger adoption.
Absolutely. And I think that portion of it no longer being binary or so many, like a few paths that you can do, if this then this, or if this and then that, right? It being a little bit more fluid in the sense, right?
Yes.
I think that's some of the challenge that some of these businesses struggle with is how do we actually set up the right guardrails at every enterprise level. There is a question about that. Even some of the most sophisticated companies in the world are running into this challenge of what is responsible AI, like how do we set it up in a way that actually doesn't cross certain lines or doesn't actually produce its own results. Like, how do we kind of keep enough of a guardrail, but still allow the system to be fluid enough to be able to use its reasoning ability and then provide us a high level of accuracy answer in the shortest amount of time, right? So, as we forward look here, 5 years from now, how do you kind of see some of these logistics leaders managing operations through this, what we call conversational data? Or do you think hey, we're still pretty far from that, and
Mm.
spreadsheets will still be running the industry.
Yeah. So I don't think Excel like spreadsheets is the enemy here. It's
Yeah,
Excel spreadsheet as the decision engine, I think, is the problem. So I
yes,
think spreadsheets will continue to exist, but I don't think they'll be the primary system for operational decisions. It'll be the norm is going to be more like conversational and proactive. So you'll start like the businesses will start having these systems where it alerts, explains, and recommend actions before things get bigger, right? So it becomes a lot more proactive and predictive. You'll start like the businesses will start having these systems where it alerts, explains, and recommend actions before things get bigger, right? So it
that's right.
becomes a lot more proactive and predictive. And the winners in the industry will be the companies that reduce this decision latency, right? Because the speed and reliability becomes more and more a competitive advantage, is how I see it. But time will tell.
Absolutely. For the listeners here, just to kind of your closing thoughts for folks that are still trying to navigate their way through this, like AI, we'll call it AI revolution. What would your message be to them as they kind of start to? I mean, there's a lot of people that are resistant to the
Yeah.
adoption because there's unknown being a part of it, maybe some morality, ethics, other things, right? But what would your message be?
Yeah. So this is happening in every industry right now, be it like supply chain, logistics, operations, engineering, product design. So I think that what I would say is that I think it'll be really worth it if they take a step and sort of just try things out, right? And instead of like having this opinion of like, there's this AI, people say it's gonna replace, or I think it's really important that they form their own opinion by trying these things out. You and I have been working on Edge Insights, right? So I think
Yeah,
a shameless plug here, like they could try these systems, right? And
absolutely.
see like how it affects their, and worst case, if they feel like this is not it, these things are not like living up to what people are saying about them, it's fine, right? But what if the opposite is true, right? So I
Exactly.
think there's only upside of trying these things and seeing it for themselves would be, I think, my advice.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And yeah, love and thank you again for all the work that you've helped support on the Edge Insight side. So shameless plug as well. Hopefully, and to that point, and exactly to the same vein of what you're saying here, people see it for the first time, and then they start to like, you can see their brain turning, right?
Exactly.
Their mind kind of churning, like, huh, I wonder if I could actually make this work at scale, this would change my life. But I think some of the times it's about like, can I do it now? Should I do it now? Like, there's a lot of like hesitancy there, but like I think for the most part, every single time people see the tool, it does open up their eyes into a window that they may not have seen in the past, right? And then this becomes, a part of their decision making process. But
Yeah, I really hope that the listeners like they at least maybe schedule a demo with your team. They should see it for themselves. I think it's very different, right?
yeah, it's very
You're
cool.
exactly right. Like the feeling of like, oh, this is like magic. It's really great.
Awesome. Well, Salman, that's thank you again for being on. This was super insightful. I got a lot from it. I hopefully our listeners do too. Thank you again, and I appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Maja. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Explore our channel for more exclusive industry insights to keep your business ahead. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe.